might be more helpful than just winning?
Awareness and truthfulness. You can just be the best version of yourself and not win, And I think it would be such a shame to call that a failure. Who do you want to be? And what qualities do you want to embody? Perspective makes a really big difference.
And that's a great perspective to enter.
Yeah.
Shannon Thompson is a lifelong athlete and coach with deep interest in the power of the mind and how it impacts an athlete's performance and experience.
In North America and within sport, we're basically taught to be relentless, to take control, take ownership, force. We need to be able to do things we want to do without actually feeling like we want to do them.
Pressure is when we feel there's a lot of a line, we're going to lose it.
Exactly.
And that puts fear and worry, and now we're not focusing on being our best by being present. Why do sports matter?
I just really think that sport is a real symbol for a lot of skills, capacities, understandings that if we were to learn them, they just serve our life so much.
What can help someone get going to starting something or to take it to the next level? Hello, everyone. I am so excited to share today's conversation with Shannon Thompson, a lifelong athlete, coach, and a shining human being who has a fascination for the psychology of well-being and high achievement. Her athletic background began in equestrian sport of 3-day eventing, which I actually had to look up because I wasn't familiar with it, but it's where a rider and a horse compete in 3 events. So dressage, cross country, and show jumping. I would love to ask you more about it as well too later. She competed nationally and internationally for more than 20 years. And after retiring from equestrian sport, she developed a passion for running. And she has ran from 800 meters through ultra trail events and almost everything in between. Her undergraduate degree is in psychology and then a master's degree in applied positive psychology from the University of Pennsylvania. She now works primarily with distance runners from high schoolers through professionals. Friends, join us today as you are going to find her deep love for performance psychology and sports psychology contagious. She has a deep passion for sharing tools that can support you on your path to excellence. Shannon Thompson, warm welcome to you to the Pause to Elevate podcast.
Well, thank you so much, Kasim, for having me. Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Thank you so much. I have to tell you, we had a conversation before we did the recording, and I so enjoyed you. You left my brain was just buzzing about all the things I want to ask you more about. So I wonder if we can begin with what got you interested in sports psychology and this performance and well-being.
As you were mentioning, I rode horses at a highly competitive level for a lot of years. And so just us performing at our best, I think in whatever our passion is or craft is, has always been interesting just through my
Mm,
own pursuit of trying to perform at my best and then trying to help athletes that I coach perform at their best. So that whole world
mm,
has always been fun and interesting to me. Um, and one thing about horse sports is that it when you're an athlete involved in horse sports,
mhm.
it's very much a whole lifestyle. Like there's not really a lot of space for anything else, and that's probably true of a lot of passions, but especially with horse sports because I think that, there's the care of the horse. There's just a whole
Yeah.
lot that goes into the business, oftentimes of being a professional equestrian. And I just reached a point where I felt like it that lifestyle wasn't for me anymore.
Mm,
And I realized a few years before I decided to move on that the mental side of sport was something that I found genuinely
mm.
fascinating. And I wanted to stay in high level sport, but I didn't necessarily want to be a full time equestrian anymore. And so that transition, from being an athlete and coach to working in this field was a pretty natural one. I think it was a solution to this desire to stay in high level sport, but to not want to do it,
When you're naming this working with horses, it's really it's beautiful, isn't it? And it takes a lot of time and energy. And so you were engaged in it originally from a young age. Then you began young age. What a bond! Learning to connect with animals, to connect to performance, and I'm sure you learned a lot about life through that.
Yeah, yeah, I know you do. I mean, I think in horse sports, you learn horse sports teaches a lot of what plenty of sports teach,
Mm.
so hard work often pays off,
Mm.
that you can progress and grow with effort. It gives you terrific relationships, both with other people and then in equestrian sport, of course, like with your horse as well. And I'd say, then each sport has its own kind of sport specific skills that it teaches. And
Mhm.
I'd say in horse sports, you really learn to take ownership of your own like emotions and your own conduct,
Mm.
and you become really self-aware because animals pay attention to your body language, and cues have to be the same in order for them to know what you want them to do. So I'd say sport just really develops your self-awareness and
Mm.
consistency and ownership of your own state.
Mm.
So those would be some things that I learned from it, I hope, or
Yeah.
got developed more so than they were before it.
You're speaking about, I know you have done some writing as well on your website, why sports matter.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering if you can say more about that. Like you mentioning what it gives us is all the things we can learn about ourselves, about life. What else? Like, why do sports matter? I know it's been a
Oh.
huge aspect of my life growing up. So, but I'm curious, why do sports
Yeah, I
matter?
I know the I know the piece of writing that you're referring to, and I'm thinking about something like, "Oh my gosh, it's been a while since I've fully considered this." I was a bit on a bit of a tear with that back then.
Yeah.
I remember when I wrote that, and it's been a while. But I'd say, like, my thoughts on it now are, I think sports are very symbolic of life, and a lot of the skills and capacities that a person needs to
Mm.
develop to be say successful in sport. Not by successful, I mean like for sure achieving the goals they want to achieve, but also just
Mhm.
like mentally and emotionally being able to cope, with the ups and downs and the path of sport, is also success. So I'd say
Mm.
just the things we need to learn to be successful in sport, across our definition of success, are really valuable qualities in life. Like now for me,
Mm.
the sport I'm most involved with is distance running. So, with distance running, showing up for something that matters to you and people that matter to you, if you're on a team, especially, are, fantastic life skills. The willingness to care about something that you don't know
Mm.
where you don't know what the outcome's gonna be, like that's a capacity we need in life. The awareness that we can care about something and show up with our best and it might not work out, and the willingness to
Yeah.
do that over and over again, I think, like, develops a really quality human being.
Mm.
And and you go through things with other people in sport too, right? So you learn about long-term relationships. You learn how to succeed alongside of the people when they're succeeding. You learn how to struggle
Right.
alongside of the people when they're struggling. So I just really think that sport is a real symbol for a lot of skills, capacities, understandings that if we were to learn them in sport, they serve our life so much.
As you're sharing this, a couple of things come to mind. One of them is the definition of success is broader. Sometimes I think we narrow a definition of success, like only if I win that whatever race or I
Mm.
get that gold, or and then it's success. But what I'm hearing from you is let's broaden the definition of success, and might be more helpful than just winning as success.
Well, if I'm gonna talk in a classically cliche sports psych way, which has its strengths, but we won't stay with just this, but this is like,
Yes.
it's obligatory that I start here in my
Yes.
field, is that, our success, I don't think it doesn't really serve us to define our success based on factors that are not fully under our control. So one
Mm.
of the major issues with defining success based on winning is, we can't control what other people are doing. We can't control another person's trajectory of progress, and
Mm.
it's problematic, I think, to define success that way because it
Mm.
basically means like you could go through a season attending to details better, more thoroughly, more bravely than you ever have. You could grow as a human being and an athlete more than you've ever grown,
Mm,
um, by bringing your like utmost presence and courage and
mm,
awareness and truthfulness. You can just be the best version of yourself and not win, you know? And I think it's just it would be such a shame to call that a failure. Um,
mm,
so yeah, I try to define success. We try to when I'm working with clients and even for myself, try to define success based on factors more so within our control. Man, and then beyond that, I think the definition of success is like a really can be like a really personal thing. Like
yeah.
I try to help athletes like when I usually ask 3 questions to try to help athletes to some extent define success. So
Mhm,
one of those questions I'll ask is like, who do you want to be? And what qualities do you want to embody? So if an athlete is
mm.
successful in embodying those qualities in their training or in their racing, that's something under your control, and
Ah,
we could define success in part by that. Another definition for success could be like, how are you going to see, or this is included in those 3 questions, like how are you going to see,
mhm,
so what perspective are you choosing on your race or on your competition, or another way of kind of defining how are you going to see is like, what relationship do you want to have with the race, or what relationship do you want to have with the space? And these are things more within
mm,
our control that really directly affect our experience of participating,
mhm,
engaging with the sport. So if we're able to work towards seeing the way we want to see and relating to that space the way we want to relate to it, I would say
mm,
that's a impressive success, you know, in my mind. And then lastly, with athletes, we focus a lot on, are they able to do what they want to do in the moments that matter most to them? So are they
mm,
able to execute like what's within their control, the way that they plan to and want to within the races and moments that matter to them? And if they are, like if they were who they want to be and they did their best to see and relate to the space the way they want to see and relate to the space, and carried out the actions to the best of their ability that they intended to, like that's to me a successful performance or a successful effort, because you really are exhausting in that case everything
yeah.
within your control.
What a beautiful three-pronged approach to success. I really love that. Now, the second part about seeing and relating, can you say a little more about that? So, seeing in terms of, do you mean visualizing themselves? Is that what you mean by
Oh
seeing?
yeah, no,
Or seeing like how they talk to themselves? Can you say more about the seeing part?
yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good question. Um, Something that I focus a lot
Mm,
on in my work is perspective. Like, what perspective are you bringing to the challenge, or what perspective are you bringing to your career? What perspective are you bringing to
mm,
your role as a coach or your role as an athlete? And perspective makes a really big difference
yeah.
to experience, right? You would know this, of course, 'cause you teach, yeah, like
Mhm,
mindful. You know, it makes a
yeah.
really big difference to our experience of a thing and also how we perform. Um, so one of the most common challenges I think that athletes I work with have is the perspective they'll kind of default to unless somebody helps them or they go through something. Oftentimes the perspective they'll default to is like, I'm here to win this race. I'm here to get a PR. I'm here
Ah,
to
personal best. Yeah.
qualify for whatever, you know? Yeah, like very outcome
Mm,
focused. You could say like an outcome focused intention or an outcome
mm,
focused purpose for being in a space. And
mm,
most of the time, an outcome focus, especially if it's an outcome focus that is on something not fully under their control, like where they're going to place or what time they're going to run or something like
ah,
that, is it usually compromises. I would say compromises performance, because if we
mm,
if we set a target that's not fully under our control, and we or decide in advance to define our success based upon whether or not we reach that target, we basically introduce like the sense of something to lose into into a performance or into an effort. And
mm,
in endurance sport, which I primarily work with distance runners, when you introduce the notion of something to lose into your performance, basically you invite fear into that space.
ah,
And then when struggle arises inside of the effort, you're more likely to panic, more likely to give up, more likely to get tense, and the performance usually suffers. Um,
Mm.
so we do our best. I say we, like people, usually most people who work in sports psychology, and also
Mhm.
like coaches who are very aware of the mental side of everything. We do our best to try to help athletes to be more process focused. So just focusing on like one chunk at a time to be more present, which is something that you, of course, would teach a lot. So we
Mhm.
try to help athletes be more process focused, be more present, and just focus on what they're going to do.
Mm.
And when they're able to do that, then their sense of nothing of something to lose is greatly reduced, and their state inside of a effort is usually more resilient because they're not
Mm.
looking for likelihood or proof that they're going to fail partway through the effort. So they're able to stay
Right.
like more present and usually perform better. So I mean, that was like a little
Mm.
bit of a side tangent on the whole notion of how we're going to see. But yeah, if we're able to choose a process based perspective for inside of a
Mm.
race, um, that helps an athlete state within the race. Um, and even I'll often take it back even a little bit more big picture than that. So,
Mhm.
oftentimes I'll talk with an athlete about deciding how they want to relate to the race or how they want to relate to
Mm.
a racing space. And so an example of that would be one that's coming to my mind right now is a professional runner who decided he wanted his relationship with the race to be like just grateful and grateful for the opportunity,
Oh,
and proud of himself for attaining his goal, to be a professional.
that's a great perspective to enter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and so we'll actively work on that because that
Mm.
athlete can also slip into a perspective of, "I have to run under 3:35 for the 1,500 meters, or people don't care about me and I failed at my dreams."
Yeah.
Like, so like us humans, our perspective co we're so vulnerable to unhelpful perspectives too, right? When, like,
Yeah.
fear comes along. So how do you wanna see basically refers to our perspective. Our perspective, it could be our
Mm.
perspective on why we're doing sport. It could be our perspective on the purpose of a certain race. It's basically those things. It's basically those things,
Mm.
like why we're doing sport and the perspective on a certain race. It could be your perspective on the role your training partners play in your running. Like, some people see their training partners as like just wonderful companions who push them to be their best. Other people see their training partners as a threat because they're worried about their training partners performing better than them. So
Yeah.
it's really all about perspectives. How are we going to see is can be a pretty broad question depending on who it is you're talking to.
Yeah. You know what you're naming, and you mentioned mindfulness as well. So you're right. I teach mindfulness based stress reduction and BSR. And one of the sessions we do in that is about perception
Mm,
and how it's not as much as the stressor because it's happening already, but how we see or don't see the stressor that impacts experience.
yeah,
And it's like,
yeah,
what is the lens that we're taking on? And this is not just a sport. This could be someone wanting to start an exercise practice regime, and they're like, oh, I don't want to go to the gym, or I'm not comfortable going to the gym. It's like, oh, so what's another perception to hold around that?
totally.
Right.
Yep. It's
Or,
100% the same thing.
yeah. So, how can we change the perception to influence experience?
Yes. Yes,
Right.
which then
So,
influences performance.
yes. So, as you're saying this, there's a big component that I've been so excited about just in the last decade is in sports psychology, the mental component, like the
Mm,
mental health, the knowing what's happening internally. It's like we're not just machines and trying to perform and you move some gadgets and it's, not just strategies to get better physically, but mentally,
mhm.
and that influences getting better. This is even if someone's not an athlete who wants to start a walking exercise or if they want to do something like this is for everyone, really. Like the
Yeah.
mental component either blocks us, brings us down, or elevates us.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, yeah. Is there if it can come to mind for you in terms of people you've worked with or clients where like, oh, there was this obstacle, mental obstacle, and something shifted or something that you've seen in your field, you're like, wow, that was a change once we address the
Oh my
mental.
gosh, that's kinda like the one thing I feel very lucky about is I get to be a part of athletes' journeys usually for quite a long time, and so I've probably got a number of stories about that. I'm just trying to think of maybe what's the best one. The one I just mentioned to you is one I just mentioned to you about the athlete who decided he wanted to be grateful and proud of himself.
Mhm.
This is an athlete who was a very good high school runner,
Mm,
quite a successful collegiate athlete.
mm,
He then now he is a professional. He's been a professional for a few years now,
mhm,
and he used to go into his races with just tons and tons of stress and anxiety and also a high sense of what you I guess you would say pressure. But
yeah.
pressure is basically the story of I have to perform well or I like have a lot to lose. And a lot of athletes I think until
Mm.
they
Oh, so,
yeah,
so well put. Pressure
well,
is when we feel there's a lot of a line we're going to lose it, and that
exactly.
puts fear. As soon as you say it, it's like, oh, that would put fear and worry, and now we're not focusing on being our best by being present.
Totally, and it's a
Yeah.
story of high stakes, right? It's a story of high stakes and, like, I have to, and it's often a story we create in our own
Mm,
mind about what's true about us and what's true about our lives, and so many young athletes, I mean, so many athletes, probably not just young athletes, so many athletes, period, opt for that story, because I think there's a bit of a misconception in our culture that for whatever reason, like I have to will like drive a person to be their best.
mm,
But so this athlete absolutely bought into that for a long time, and but he would just find that when he felt this pressure, he'd be anxious inside of his races, he would be indecisive, he would get stressed, he would be intimidated by other athletes, he would overthink his decision making. And then what would happen is he'd have an average race or a poor race. Usually it was like
mm,
average or poor. And then he'd finish the race and he would like beat himself up severely for having had an average
mm.
or poor race, like ridicule himself and you're this and you're that and you're never and like just
Very
he
critical.
yeah, and he
Yeah.
would end up in a scary place mental health wise. It was a
Mm,
he really could get dark. And just over time and through a lot of conversations and few like a couple of other methods, he eventually reached a point where one day he walked into my office and he says he goes, I was thinking, he's like, I am living my dream. Why can't I just be grateful and proud of myself? And he got to the end of his own rope, and was just fed up with the
mm,
perspective that he had. And he was actually the athlete that prompted me to focus even more on relationship with the race. So we just, instead of worrying
mm,
about, yeah, how he was going to perform in any one race, we just clarified that his goal for the way he was going to relate to his races was to be grateful and proud of himself. And we talked about that more than anything else. And we worked on methods to try to help him just view the whole thing with gratitude and pride for his own
mm.
efforts. And he found that he was able the results started to come, I think, as a
Ah,
byproduct of that. And now, yeah, like now he goes into races way with a much 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 lighter heart. um and he's performing just fine. I mean, everyone always wants to be performing better, but I
better, of
think,
course.
yeah, but he's performing, he's performing, but I think, but then he'll finish a average race and he can objectively explore the strengths and the weaknesses of the race and take it and move on to the next one. He no longer goes into a scary place
Yeah.
mentally, like mental
Or
health wise.
spiraling, yes, exactly, because
No.
it can trigger depression, more anxiety, like
Yeah.
withdrawings, like a lot of self-blame.
Oh,
Really,
yeah.
it can really spiral. And
Yep, and that's been one of the most dramatic changes I've
mm,
seen that I feel very inspired to think of him because it sometimes people are so stuck in whatever, this from your work, but so stuck
mm,
in the lens that they see their life in the world, they feel like it's not gonna be possible for them to see differently, and
yeah.
that was one of the most profound changes I've seen. Like, this person truly relates to his sport differently and his life. Therefore,
Mm,
his life differently. He just he sees it differently. So his whole experience is different, and his performance I'd say is better as well, and they can
Mm.
come along as well, yeah. So that's one.
This is so beautiful what you're sharing, because that aspect of relating is what is the relationship we have to something, whether it's
Yeah.
sports performance, whether to our work, whether to some stressor we have, how we relate to it, how are we looking at it, how are we working with it. Such an important component, because
Yeah.
that's something we can influence, is our relationship to something. We may not be able to change the something,
Yeah.
like you said, there's conditions in the race, or there's challenging coworkers we have or whatever it might be, the external, but we
Yeah.
can control how we view it, how we relate to it, and that's a
Yep.
really important aspect. You shared something earlier as well. We're talking about, so what has what do sports help with, and one of the things you're naming as well is getting to know ourselves, right? Like
Mm.
we get to know really uh, things about ourselves. And you remind me of a quote that I read as a teen. And one of my heroes was and still is, I mean, he's passed away a long time ago, but Bruce Lee, martial
Oh
artist.
gosh, yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah,
I
me
mean,
too.
I had posters of Bruce Lee everywhere in my room. And, one of the things he said, which really impacted me, is you can't understand yourself in isolation.
Mm.
I really, for me, it was a challenge teen years, and I withdrew a lot, and we went through a lot of change, and immigrating to a new country, and I really struggled during those years, and how I dealt with it by just isolating,
Right.
right? I wanted to
Yeah.
isolate,
Yeah.
and that quote really, like, I was like, huh, don't understand myself. Isolation, I understand myself. What is he talking about?
Yeah.
And it made
Yeah.
me, that began this thing of, I want to see if it's true. I can learn about myself through others, and
Yeah.
sports is one way that has really helped me, is connecting since I was a teen, connecting with others, and getting to know things about me I would not have discovered. Like,
Yes.
what is my mental limit? What do I think I can or can do? And just taking care of a body.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah, yeah. That's no, that's true. I think, yeah, you do. Like anytime you go down a path of something that matters to you, you probably inevitably you learn what you love, you learn where your strengths are, and then I think if you follow that path far enough, there's gonna be significant obstacles, and then you learn how you react to those obstacles.
Yeah.
Um, but also one area I work a lot is with cross country running teams, in
Hmm.
particular, like high school ones, but I'm very involved with a collegiate running team in Northern Arizona. And these are athletes who are pursuing their passion, thing that's central in their lives. It's the center of most of their lives, alongside one another. And they're doing that for 4 or 5 years during like super formative
Wow.
times in their life. And they show up. They cross country is a very much a team sport. Like it's one of the great emphasis is, at least I think, with a team that's doing it right, is to, like, you run for each other. You're trying to always trying to create great team workouts and great team races,
Mm.
and so you've got young people who are going through life who are doing this like side by side. So you've got
Mm.
um, struggles outside of running. You've got academic challenges. You've got mental
Yeah.
health challenges. You've got physical challenges that get in the way of them being able to train consistently. You've got limited number of spots to run on the national championship team. So there's there's many hard things and vulnerable moments that those athletes go through together in that space,
Mm.
and it's an incredible place to learn who you are in relation to others. Very
Yeah.
difficult, I think. Very difficult because there's so many meaningful challenges that come their way together during that time, and it's also a time where people aren't that mature yet, right? So we don't always
Yeah.
respond super maturely to some of these challenges, but I just yeah, I witnessed those athletes going through their 4 or 5 years together, and it's a beautiful, incredible thing to watch them come up against the worst sides of themselves and the best sides of themselves, and then
Mm.
watch those, say, worst sides transform and grow, and watch them be
Mm.
brave and watch them care for each other and meet each other with empathy. And so yeah, I just think, sport. anywhere, anytime it can bring us into regular contact with others towards something that matters to everyone is such
Mm.
an interesting process.
See, when something rubs us the wrong way, whether a result or a coworker or an athlete we're working with, it gives us a chance to get to know us.
Yeah, it
All right.
does.
So,
Yeah.
and I want to ask you something, but for those who are not familiar with the cross country, what does that involves? Just to
Yeah.
help.
So, team cross country is basically where usually it's 7 athletes from a school
Mm,
will race a certain distance
mm.
and against like numerous other schools, and there's each of their 7 athletes. So
Yes.
cross country, like I just last weekend was the NCAA championships down
Ah,
here in the States, and I think there's like close to 40 teams in
oh
that race.
wow.
So you got 40 teams, and each team has 7 athletes, and so you've got a whole bunch of close to 300 athletes racing in this field,
Amazing.
and it's basically the top 5 scoring athletes on each team. Their points get totaled up, and then in the end, whoever has the lowest score. So because the closest to the front. So if you're first, you get 1 point. If you're second, you get 2 points. So like the
Okay, so
lowest,
yeah.
yeah, the lowest score wins the meet. And so everyone's always trying to um, get the lowest score, and the team. One really neat thing is the team element is just paramount. Like the team comes, the
Mm,
whole running for each other. The team score comes first,
together, yeah.
and which is not something you often think of in a running event. Running seems quite individual. So I've been pretty impressed. Like it's very much a thing in the States, like the high school cross country and collegiate cross
Mm,
country, and it's a very high level too. Like the fellow who won NCAA's last weekend ran in the Olympics this past
wow.
summer. So it's a very, very high level. And um, it's really special. It's really special to run to run for other people. And so yeah, women run 6K, the men run 10K.
Mm.
And
So this is where they pass the baton as well, or are they different? No,
no,
no.
no, they run as a group. So it's like all like 300 athletes out there on the
Oh,
course
okay,
together.
okay. So that,
And
what is that called when you're passing the baton?
oh, that's like a relay.
Relay. Okay, I thought. Okay, got it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Sorry. So yeah, like cross country is like 40 teams and 7 athletes to a team,
That's a
and
lot of people
it
get
is
on the
over
field.
over like natural terrain for
Yeah.
like 6 or 10K, depending if it's women or men, and yeah, it's whatever team gets the lowest point total will win.
Mm,
But what's cool about it is just how team focused it really is. Like
yeah.
yeah, and how that team focus, how it often brings out the best in people. Like there's people make brave choices, hang in there in a hard moment, like they never would or could potentially if it was just for themselves. And so it's
Yeah.
very, very special. It's a very, very special thing to do with as a group. And
Mm.
yeah,
And when you were sharing about this group as well, working with them a couple of years and seeing them grow over time, you said something that really stuck to me. I just want to go back to it. Like it takes courage to face what's coming up internally and work with it, like the
yeah,
disappointments, the hurt, uh, conflict that happens in a team or for any of us. Like it actually takes courage to go, oh, this is what I felt, and to
yeah,
actually honor, I am really agitated about this and this happened. How can I work with it? And rather than the suppressing, pushing down what's going internally, but actually making sense. What's going on here? And then, so I just wanted to name that because you said it so beautifully. Like, yeah, it takes bravery to go, here's what's holding me back right now. Here's what's causing tension in the team.
yeah.
Let's talk about it. Like, that's not easy for a lot of people because
No,
avoiding is what most of us like to do. Like, I don't want to talk
it's
about it.
true. Yeah, it is. Well, one thing that I find really interesting about distance running, and I think the same could be true in others. For sure, the same could be true in other
Mm,
sports too. But just distance running is such an exposing sport. Like you're out on the edge of your capabilities for a
mm,
prolonged period of time with not a lot to occupy your focus other than the
yeah.
fact that it hurts, and you're hoping to get whatever goal, like you want. And you're getting gradually depleted. And
Mm.
so whatever beliefs you have or fears you have are gradually coming, usually for a distance runner, like coming closer and closer to the surface as they're out in this space with nothing else to focus on
Mm.
but like what's coming up inside them. So yeah, so it's very exposing. And I would say a lot of my work, both like individually within individuals and also as a team, is
Mhm.
we really want to get real about what's deep down inside of us. Because obviously, I think you as a psychologist,
Mhm.
how healthy and important it is to recognize what's going on inside of us and how it affects our life and what we're believing and the lens we're seeing through, in life. And to experience life, it's important to, or very helpful to understand those things. But in distance running, if we don't, it's all going to come out in the race anyway. And usually not in a way that serves performance. So if we want to be an athlete who wants to be a reliable athlete when things get hard inside of a race, it serves us to get real about like what's going on inside of ourselves
Mm.
mentally and emotionally. Um, and and if we're running for a team, it also is important and serves us to get real about that, both with respect to ourselves and also with how we're feeling in relationship to our
Yeah.
team and our situation. Um,
Mm.
yeah, so you're right, it takes courage. And I would say, for many, it's a necessity. Not everyone. Some
Yeah.
people are able to like full on
Just
shove things aside and still
plow
do what they
through
need.
it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They for sure can, but a lot are not as well. So it's yeah,
Mm.
it's often a necessity.
Yeah. You're also pointing to something that comes up in sports and in life for all of us is adversity,
Hmm.
setbacks.
Hmm.
So, what have you found helpful in working with adversity and setbacks and bouncing back from challenges?
Yeah, adversity and setbacks. Gosh, I have a favorite right now. Oh gosh, I do have a favorite focus right now, which I was about to leap to, and then I was like, "Oh, do you really want to go there yet?" And I'm like right now quite fascinated in the hero's journey. Is that something that you're familiar with? The
Yeah.
archetypal like hero's journey, which is um, just basically the notion that the things we love draw us down a path of our like shaping and growing, and oftentimes that shaping and growing is really unpleasant and not something, we find ourselves in circumstances we wouldn't have chosen willingly, and it's only by following this path of something that we love that we were willing to get so deep into something that when we actually experience difficulty, we kind of have to get through it. And so I talk a lot right now about the hero's journey, about meeting circumstances where we realize our ability to know and control are limited,
Mm.
and coming to terms with that. And
Mm.
I try to teach about the ego, and that the ego is a part of ourselves that's looking out for ourselves, but um, it does make everything about ourselves. And sometimes we come up against circumstances that challenge those key faculties of the ego, which is to like know and control. And we find that we can't, and we gotta like learn how to relax our ego and set down those notions of control and kind of
Mm.
surrender and take things one step at a time. And that process of surrender is actually a gift, because oftentimes as we set down the notion we can force and control, we can relax a little bit and get a little bit
Mm.
more present and be a little bit more grateful and connect more to those around us. But it often takes hard things
Yeah.
to really have us face up to the fact we can't control everything. So that's a bit of a favorite tangent right now. So that's a big kind of existential tangent. Um,
Mhm.
but I found even high schoolers receiving it, which surprised me.
Mm.
So the hero's journey and the notion of the notion of ego death is actually something I'm engaging with a lot right now, and its benefits. Um,
Mm.
Other ways of making it through setbacks,
Mhm.
usually it's just trying to take things one day at a time, trying to focus on what we can do versus what we can't do, trying to
Mm.
find things in that we can currently be grateful for, controlling what you can control,
Yeah.
connecting to the people around you, sharing. what sharing what things like how you're actually doing, and
Mhm.
being vulnerable about how something actually feels are kind of other ways to work through it, I suppose. Us realizing that we do have some control over the perspective we take on
Mhm.
this stage of our journey. Those are like a few angles.
Mm. Hello, everyone. I just wanted to quickly thank you for stopping by and watching this content. It truly means the world to me that you're interested in creating positive change. I also want to invite you to join our amazing community. I have free events online about mindfulness, mindfulness based stress reduction, laughter, as well as retreats that you can do from the comfort of your own home. And are you ready for this? Self paced program that you can do about mindfulness and stress reduction. So you can join the newsletter below to stay up to date on all these goodies. And if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and press that button. It really helps me to keep this content going and reach out to more guests. Thank you so much again, and may you continue enjoying watching this episode. And if we just even go back to the hero's journey, if someone's first time they're listening to this, they're like, oh, so how can I apply that to my life? And I'm wondering, what would you say? Let's say someone is just facing a challenge, and whether it's sports, a personal challenge, work, financial, and there's something about what how you're describing it. It's like this is part of my journey, and it's going to call upon my inner strength to unfold this. Like, let's be with this. And I wonder, from your perspective, how can someone hearing this for the first time apply this hero's journey? Because it's so
Yeah.
beautiful how you described it.
Yeah, yeah. So, I think the first thing is just to understand the stages and the unfolding of the actual kind of narrative that is the unfolding of the hero's journey. So there's a few stages to it. So, one is the call to adventure, and the call to adventure is just basically something interests you enough to want to pursue it. So it could be a profession, it could be a sport, it could be a race, it
Mhm,
could be a romance, it could be a trip, it could be anything. Call to
mhm,
adventure is just something that like calls you out of your comfort zone and away from home is kind of the definition. You leave home,
mhm,
leave the comfort zone. Usually we head off on our hero's journeys quite innocently, not expecting they're going to turn
mhm,
into something that is more significant or that difficult, so that's they start with a call to adventure. The crossing they often involve what's called the crossing of the first threshold, which is kind of a little bit of a leap of faith. You kind of defy
mhm,
reason by crossing the first threshold, on a legit hero's journey. The next stage would be the belly of the whale. So that's where the hero encounters just the challenges inherent on the journey. So
mhm.
maybe the person on the trip, struggles with the lonely planet and can't get around whatever country they're visiting, or maybe person involved with sport and with running just finds workouts difficult. Like that's what
Yeah.
I would say is like the belly of the whale. I see it as kind of the
Mhm,
natural challenges that were expected or mostly
mhm,
expected, like on the journey. Um, and then you enter the road of trials, and this is usually where things get difficult repeatedly for longer than you thought. Um,
mm,
then the later stages or the more severe stages of the road of trials. In the original text, the most original text I know on the hero's journey is a book called the um, Hero with a Thousand Faces, written by
mm.
Joseph Campbell. He
Yes.
calls these two stages meeting with the goddess and atonement with the father. And I changed those terms, to be honest, because
Mhm.
working with high school and collegiate athletes, if I start calling something meeting a goddess and atonement with the father, like they're gonna have all sorts
They're
of,
like, say what?
oh yeah, like goddess and father are gonna have people are gonna have all sorts of different responses to those terms based upon their life, right? So I instead call those stages meeting the nature of the earth and atonement with the power. And
Atonement with power?
atonement with what the power. I'll
Mhm,
explain those. So in the meeting with the earth, that's where the hero comes face to the face with the fact that basically life or sport or romance or travel or whatever their
mhm,
hero's journey has brought them down, has wonderful features and like gifts and nourishment and
mhm,
joy and safety and care, And it also is brutal and cruel and dangerous and
Yeah.
painful and unfair. One key element to the hero's journey is unfairness, is reaching a point where something happens
Mhm.
that feels unfair. So meeting the nature of the earth is where you come up to the edges of your ability to know and control. Something happens that feels unfair.
Mm.
And the way to pass through this stage is to accept it, is to be like, like life's sometimes unfair,
Yeah.
as opposed to raging and fighting and judging. I mean, and I know there's times in life where raging and fighting has to happen. That's a different, that's just a different
Yeah, yeah,
kind
yeah.
of a story. But yeah, it's where it's letting the notion of should go. Like I have
Mm.
one thing that I encounter a lot with the athletes I work with is I'll have athletes who are repeatedly injured. They started their running career and they had big dreams about where it was going to take them. And 5 years in a row, they have some major injury that sets them back, and they get 5 years down the road and they never
Mm.
reach the goals that they hope to, despite their best efforts. And that's very much like in meeting the nature of the earth kind of a moment. It's like, oh, I had a story about what should happen and it
Yeah.
didn't. And you get to this point where like you realize the should and the raging and the controlling and the forcing and the blaming and the resentment hurts, and you're just like, no more, I'm not going to exist this way, basically. And so
Yeah.
that's that whole notion of ego death. Um and then the atonement with the power is just recognizing something that's, if given you've given a lot of power in your life. So in athletes, this might be just outcomes of races. They had dreams of running a certain time, or like
Uh-huh.
reaching a certain level of performance, and maybe they never do it. And they realize,
Mm.
wow, I gave a lot of power to that, I gave a lot of energy, and I put a lot of my value in.
An
um
identity.
yeah, yep.
Yeah.
And whoa, that didn't happen, which often feels unfair, and there can be some resentment around that.
Mm.
And so, but when they can be like, "Ooh, again, I couldn't control as much as I thought I could. I
Mm.
can't know, like my should was wrong. Whoa." And then when that athlete can be like, "Wow, that didn't happen for me, but it was sure a rich road, and I sure made great friends, and I'm so proud of my courage." And
Mm.
like, okay, okay, life, okay, sport, I'll take you as you are.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's it. And then
There's embracing, like there's a welcoming
yeah,
what is. It doesn't mean we have to like what has happened, but there's an embracing what you're naming. Like, here's what it is. Okay, life. Like, let's go. Like accepting,
yeah.
and also feeling it, not this toxic positivity of like, oh,
Oh,
everything is okay. It's like, no, this really sucks.
it's really sucked.
And let me embrace it, open up to it, and grow through it.
Yeah.
That's a whole different mindset.
Yep, and it's
Yeah.
it's a humbling it's a humbling,
Yeah.
humbling process. But then that's not the end of the story.
Mm.
So
Mm.
the other
Mhm.
side of that is, I call it connecting to the heart of the world. I think in Joseph Campbell's book, he calls it like the ultimate boon, or the elixir of life.
Mm.
And what happens is when we humble ourselves, we realize life is what it is, sport is what it is, relationships are what they are. I can't control them. I don't know what should be.
Mhm.
And like you embrace it, like you say, you actually get to be with whatever it is, as you are. And we can be more present, experience the joy of presence, experience greater connectivity with others, instead of like a notion we could be superior, competing against
Yeah.
others. And it's like through that and gratitude to even be able to partake in whatever it is that we do. And then what's interesting is oftentimes when we, like, let's say that ego dies and we let go of the notions of should and control,
Mhm.
and we are present with what's here, oftentimes the thing we want comes of its own accord, because
Oh,
oftentimes our own attempts to control and judge and need and want were actually like what was getting in the way. So
yeah.
you're kind of like, how does someone use the hero's journey? And I really think understanding the whole story is a large part of how it's understanding
Mm.
that, like, oftentimes you get life breaks you enough, oftentimes you become the kind of person that just literally sees it differently. And
Mm.
the whole thing changes for you in a way that's like that's really rewarding. So I'd say it's just like understanding the story so you can hang on to get to the other side, and to recognize this is an archetypal story that's found in most cultures. And it's generally trustworthy, and but it's miserable. It takes a long time, and none of us choose it.
Yeah, of course. You remind me of this saying, a late Vietnamese monk, Thich Nhat Hanh.
Yeah.
He says it beautifully. He says, no mud, no lotus.
That's it. That's it. Yeah. Oh, it is. It
Right?
is.
It's like,
Yeah.
the muddiness, and sometimes we don't want the muddiness. We just want the flashy good stuff that's happening. But to get to whatever we're wanting, whether it's in sports or life or relationship, it's gonna be muddy, and sometimes it's messy, and sometimes disappointing, and sometimes it's not what we had planned for or wanted. And
No,
I
no,
think that
no.
that's what can be so dejecting and frustrating for many of us, is like, well, I was supposed to be whatever there by now. Financially, I need to be there, or
Yeah,
whatever. But wait a minute, this is just how it is right now. Like, it's
totally.
not
Yep.
according to my plan, but it's moving somewhere. and
Yeah,
and even if it isn't, how can I work with it?
totally.
Yeah.
I think a step that we miss a lot in North America, and I think we miss for sure in sport,
Mm.
maybe less, for sure less. I think this gets missed a lot less in other cultures. Is I think like in North America and within sport, we're basically taught like to be relentless, to like take
Yeah.
control, take ownership,
Yeah.
force,
Push,
like
push, push.
push, linear
Yeah.
progress,
Yeah.
and the thing that I say like and don't like about the hero's journey
Mm.
is you move through it by giving up control. You move through it by surrendering to forces larger than you. You move through it by becoming more humble and accepting and
Mm.
softening as opposed to forcing. And I think like, and that's really hard. I think most of our instincts want to force. And I think sometimes
Yeah.
the hero's journey just has to work its way with us. Like we can try our best to soften, but I think what I'm trying to say is I just think the softening is the key.
Mm.
And that's a really hard thing to do. It's a really hard thing to do. We don't know how to do it well in our culture. I think other cultures, probably more older cultures, know how to do it better.
Yeah, that's wisdom. Like,
It's wisdom. It
that's
is.
wisdom, right? Because I
Yeah,
mean, it's a reaction we have. Like, it's a default reaction. We're gonna tense. We're gonna to force and push something rather than just relax into what is. We don't have to
definitely.
like it, whatever the outcome, the results of a race or job or relationship. Just there's something about the more we can just relax into it. We don't have to like it, but we begin to open like new doorways of change. Like, oh, what? How can I
Yeah, you
handle this?
do.
Yeah,
Yeah, no,
yeah,
you do.
yeah.
You do. But it's not at all our instinct to do that, is it? To like
It isn't. That's not the default.
relax. I think one of the best things about the hero's journey is it kind of teaches that there's something trustworthy in that relaxation that has nothing to do with your will or
Mm.
your planning or your knowledge or your
Yeah,
skills or your agency. And that is probably largely the ultimate boon is coming into a relationship with life. Um,
yeah,
and yeah, and giving it a role, letting it have a role.
yeah.
Um,
When you're saying that, it made me think of just watching a documentary right now on Netflix about the gymnast Simone Biles.
yeah, yeah.
And it's just like, wow, what she went through, and the setback, and like internally what happened for her. Like,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
really has shed so much light in sport to like, this really matters. What's happening inside of us really matters.
It does. And
Yeah.
one thing that was interesting to me was I watched the first 2 of those. I haven't watched the 3rd. I know
Yeah.
there's a 3rd one. I haven't watched the 3rd one yet. I wondered, like, a huge part of her work was just stopping
Yeah.
from the sounds of things. 'Cause
Yeah.
I remembered hearing about her situation, like, back at the Olympics where she wasn't able to finish.
Tokyo 20.
Yeah, and I
Yeah, yeah,
remember wondering, like,
2020.
"Man, what would a sports psychologist do with that?" I don't know, like, that particular problem that she had, and I remember watching the, documentary, and a big break was what they did, and I mean, she
Yeah.
works with a psychologist, I think, to with her own mental health,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that particular problem, she just had to stop doing
Yeah, like,
gymnastics.
yeah, not push more and harder.
Yeah.
which is again
Yeah.
the default. No, you just got to overcome it, keep going. And no, actually, winning meant to step back.
Yeah. And
W-
allow her own self to regain,
Yeah,
it was in, like, I have to watch it again, but that, if I recall correctly,
yeah,
it was largely that, and then just building back slowly. That didn't sound like there was a major strategy to fix it.
yeah. And that stepping back, which may feel like, oh, everything's over, but
Yeah.
led her to dominate.
Yeah. It
The
did.
next Olympics after was just like, wow. But that takes courage,
Yeah,
because when we step away from something, take a break, it may feel scary, right?
for
Like
sure, for
whatever it
sure.
is, even as simple as someone wanting to go to the gym again and they stopped, like, oh, I failed. Well, maybe step back. And now how can you get back? What do you need to recharge, to get back some kind of routine of exercise?
Yeah.
And maybe on that front, I have a couple more things, and this is so enjoyable. I feel like we need like at least another like 3 hours, like.
I know, I know.
But I'll have a couple of things I want to ask you about. So, how do you work with motivation? Sometimes people think, "Oh, I'm not motivated enough to get to the next level. I'm not motivated enough to start even exercise. I'm not
Yeah.
how." And sometimes we overemphasize motivation. What's your perspective on that, and what can help someone get going to starting something, a sport, an exercise, or to take it to the next level? Is how much motivation do we
Oh
need?
man, that's actually, there's probably a lot of layers to that one.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm thinking, like, if I think about the whole concept of, like, motivation and what it is and what, can get in the way, or just the absence
Mm,
of it, and the first two things that come to my mind is
mm,
low motivation is normal. I think feeling like we want to do something, especially if it's something we're actually committed to doing and we know we're going to keep doing it, it really comes and goes. Like, I talk to a lot of
mm.
athletes who are n- they are so grateful to be doing what they're doing, and yet maybe 3 times a week, they don't wanna go on their run. They don't wanna go on, they don't feel like it, it's just it's hard and it's cold and it's effort and it's warm inside, and they just don't really feel like it, but they go, and therefore, in that case, like, low motivation is not a problem, because it's just normal. It's something they all
Mm,
deal with, so I think one way I guess I could address it. I think there's a lot of questions to ask of people who are struggling with motivation, but for some, it's just helpful to know that it's normal, and the best in the
mm.
world aren't motivated a whole bunch of the time.
Yeah.
So that should normalizing it is one. I think a helpful one that I try to teach athletes a lot is, and you probably know this yourself, is just like, if we just do one small thing well, we get a little bit of dopamine, which helps with any motivation. So I would suggest, like, maybe you don't want to go on your 10-mile run, but maybe just commit to 1 mile run with relaxed form.
Yeah.
And if you go do your 1 mile with relaxed form, odds are you're going to be like, oh, good job. You did that really well. Maybe I
Yeah.
can do the next one and the next one. So doing things well creates motivation, as opposed to the notion that we need motivation to do things well.
Ah,
Yeah.
like I want to highlight, bold what you just said, like put it in a bumper sticker.
I know. I know it's hard though, right? Because you gotta, like, get going to do the thing. But there's a phrase I use, which is heart decisions. And
Mhm.
what I mean by heart decisions is literally just like, if you know you want to do something, but you don't want to do it, but it's just like, just move your body to do, like, we need to be able to do things without wanting. We need to be able to do things we want to do without actually feeling like we want to do them. And so I use heart decisions in a race, because, like,
Mm.
late in a
And
race,
not hard, heart.
heart,
Yeah,
Heart.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And like, one thing athletes will share with me sometimes is they'll get late into a race, and they'll have their brains telling them, I don't care if I run faster, I don't care if I beat that person in front of me. And the I don't care is just a way to protect them from, like, hurting more and taking a risk.
Yeah.
And so one thing somebody said to me once is like, at no time ever did my brain say, I think it's a good idea for us to like run faster in the last quarter of a race, you know? And so the understanding is we're not going to rely on feeling like we want to make that choice. We're just going to
Mm.
make a heart decision, which is like my head, I don't care what my head says, but my heart knows if I don't make this decision, I'm going to regret it. And so I'm going to like lead
Mm.
with my heart, lead with my body, and just move my body forward. So that's heart decisions, and inside of a race or inside of, you could use that in life too. Like, I don't really want to go for my run, but I'm going to get myself up off my chair and go out the door without convincing myself I want to, and then
Mm.
that usually leads to more motivation, because consistency and doing things well often lead to more motivation.
I love that. Heart decisions.
Heart
I love that.
decisions. Yeah, yeah, not head decisions. It's heart
Yeah.
instead of head.
And now
Um,
waiting to feel, and this is one of the things that I share with people is we're not
yeah,
going to wait to feel motivated. The motivation will
no.
come by doing the behavior, which is
Mhm,
just put your shoe on, just get your gym bag, just get your key or whatever, however you're getting to the gym.
exactly.
It's focusing on the behavior rather than the feeling of motivated, and the
Yeah,
behavior then will create more of feeling good about it.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yep. And then I just say another thing is just when it comes to motivation, I think absence of motivation isn't always just absence of motivation. Sometimes it's the presence of something else, like the presence of fear, the presence of fatigue, the
Mm.
presence of awareness this isn't the right thing for you. Like it
Mm.
could be, I think opposite, so I'm saying I'm not motivated. It could be not that you're not I'm just not motivated. It could be I'm afraid, or I'm tired, or
Yeah.
I don't love this anymore, or so I think when it comes to resistance to doing something, it's worthwhile to explore what else is present besides the absence of motivation, and maybe
Mm.
maybe it's not to try to motivate yourself, maybe it's to work through that presence actually and understand it better. Might be the task. So
Mm.
that's just another angle.
Yeah. So it just might be an indicator that we need to address something.
Yeah.
Like, so it could be indicators. So it's not I'm not motivated. Maybe it's like you're saying. I actually need to change how I'm working out, or I need to change. If I'm starting a workout, I don't like going to this place. I need to find another place. Like
Yeah.
maybe it's like addressing something bigger than just motivation. So yeah.
Yeah.
So
Or
that
maybe this
widens the
isn't the
lens.
time to be training. Maybe this is a time when something else is going on in my life, the and training to the degree I think I should isn't actually the right thing for me
Yeah.
in this period of time.
Yeah. This brings me to something you share in your research. And I wanted to read a quote. I really loved it. So I'm just going to read a quote from something that you call dare.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to read that because I really loved it. You say, although dare state shares a great deal with deliberate practice, which is primarily the experience of working outside one's comfort zone on a specific aspect of performance. It includes two additional components, Miss Dare: elements of flow state and a love of challenge.
Mhm.
I love that. So, what is there, and can you share about these two additional components?
Oh, yeah. Oh my gosh. Good for you for looking at that research. That is It's funny you bring that up. That I haven't looked at that for a long time. So I try to remember. Well, I know I do remember the general intention underneath it. But yeah, so the basic premise under DARE, which stood for deliberate autonomous reaching engagement, was
Mm,
that a person can be doing something hard that's uncomfortable and essentially be experiencing characteristics of flow state, and that these things can occur together, whereas previously I think a lot of literature would have said they were mutually exclusive. And I had a theory that, that athletes who that I had a thought from my experience as an athlete, and also from working with athletes, was just that, you can be doing something outside your comfort zone that hurts or is difficult or is hard, or you're and be present enough to be in flow,
mm,
and that this combination of factors probably leads to like optimal perhaps optimal growth and optimal progress. And
Mm.
I had love of challenge in there. And I think yeah, like there's people who love to be in a place that's outside their comfort zone, on the edge of what they can do, trying
Mm.
to be better, you know?
Mhm.
And so it's DARE was very much this intersection of doing something deliberately that's hard and currently beyond your skill level, while being present like you are in flow state, with a sense of value about doing that.
Mhm.
So yeah, I had a theory back in grad school that this combination of factors would lead to
Mm.
optimal progress, and
Mm.
we found that it did.
Mm.
The I didn't have a high sample size in
Mhm.
my in my research, so the findings were not statistically significant, if I
Mhm.
recall. But I think we felt if I had a larger sample size, they potentially would have been, and they
Mhm.
were certainly significant in terms of, and I realized like statistical significant measures like the likelihood you would have the same results by chance, right? So it's like, but
Right.
one thing we did find was that the people who scored highest on my like dare measure that I created then had improved 2.5% more than those who scored low at the lowest level of the DARE measure, which is
Mm.
significant with a different meaning of the word, but significant
Right.
in distance running. 2.5% is a very significant
Big
amount
increase.
of,
Yeah.
of improvement. So yeah, like yeah, and even
Mm.
yeah, athletes who are able to love the hard stuff and be present with it. Anecdotally, I would say that those athletes seem to they typically progress.
Yes.
Um,
That makes total sense to me, because even I just, as I read it, I thought, oh yeah, instead of like grunting and pushing through the challenge and getting through it, actually loving the challenge,
yeah, yeah,
growing through it, and
yep,
flowing in the challenge. Like that for me is just, it's a perception change right there. Like, oh, I can, so I can, and I love the acronym. It's dare, and that's how I've been thinking about it since I read it. I'm like, okay, I'll dare to be in flow states, let it happen, even if there's a challenge in
yeah,
sport or even like work project, or it's like, okay, let's flow,
yep,
and the love of a challenge.
that's
I think
right.
I think we all can benefit. All listeners can benefit from that. Yeah,
Totally. Yeah.
yeah,
And it's very applicable to the hero's journey too, because I think if you're going through a hard time and you're like, "Oh, I see where I am. I think I'm in a hero's journey." Okay. Like
yeah.
there's purpose for this. I'm gonna like get present, and I'm gonna look at my perspective, and I'm gonna open as much as best I can to the process. And like that's very much a dare state inside that hero's journey, you know?
So beautiful. So this has been so uplifting and so eye opening, mind opening. So I'm wondering, I have one final question for you before we wrap up, which is, the name of a podcast is Pause to Elevate, and often curious what helps people to elevate. So, for you, what would you say in your life? What are the forms of pauses, or one or two? You're like, oh, this helps me elevate. I'm
For me
curious.
personally,
Yeah.
yeah, well, I start my day. I'll tell you how I start my day. I actually do quite a lot before I even get out of bed.
Mhm.
So I believe dreams have significance. So
Mhm.
I'll always start the day reflecting on my dreams and trying to see if
Mm.
there's something that I should be paying attention to in my dreams. So that's the first thing. And then the next thing is this will start us down like another path. Is I'm very interested in internal family systems therapy, or like
Mm.
and people may not have heard of it before, but for those listeners who haven't, the internal family systems is basically like a lens on people that
Mhm.
views each of us as like a basically a conglomeration of personalities and
Yes.
parts. And so I'll like check in with my parts, and I'll be like, who needs attention? But like before I get out of
Mm.
bed. So it's kind of like checking in with your family members, you know? How are we all doing today? Does anybody need anything before we like
Mm.
start the day? And so I give my parts some attention. And then I'm a like I'd say both spiritual and religious person. I have a
Mhm.
church literally outside my bedroom window. It's like in the window. And
Yes.
so I'll like pause and listen for anything that
Mm,
God or life or universe feels like it's important for me to hear. Or sometimes I'll share something on my mind and listen.
mm,
And then I do 20 minutes just focusing on the breath, being open to whatever the universe or God wants to tell me.
mhm,
And um, and then I read this little email that I get subscribed to from a very liberal Christian organization that
mhm.
comes every morning, and then I get out of bed. So I have quite a
Beautiful.
long one. I'm lazy. I don't get up very fast at all. Um,
You're
and
deliberate. This is deliberate. It's beautiful, intentional.
it's a very lengthy.
Yeah.
It's a luxurious, lengthy start to my day.
Mhm.
Still working on not feeling guilty about
No,
it.
I'm so glad because it's so important. So you taking the time to do this, and if we all do this, take the time for what can nurture us, we can be there for others in a better way.
Oh gosh, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yep, and I do feel like it would be good to have another pause in the day or later in the day. I'm
Mm,
for sure guilty of, from that point on, just, like, not stopping all day,
mhm.
maybe some of that could be broken up or maybe some more could be
Throughout the day, yeah. So
interspersed.
front
Yeah,
loaded pause. Yeah,
uh-huh.
yeah, yeah.
Mostly
Yeah.
just procrastination to get out of bed, you know? It's like it's good use of procrastination, but
But that is really good use of time because you're doing something very intentional. And it helps
yeah,
you
no,
connect to
thank you.
you,
Yeah.
kind of tune into you, tune into your heart, your mind, your body, tune into the greater universe, your spirituality. Like it's helping you connect rather than just I'm just gonna sit in bed. You're really connecting intentionally. So it's just beautiful.
Well,
Thank you for
well, I
sharing
should ask
because
you what you do. What do you do?
I have a couple of things. So for me, my morning typically is exercise. That's
Yep,
my pause.
yep.
And then my meditation is typically middle of the day because I
Nice,
often
okay.
see clients in the day, in the morning and the afternoon if I'm not doing a podcast.
Yeah,
And the meditation is my break.
nice. That's a good place to put it, I
It's
feel.
what resets me. Like literally, I feel my brain just goes from like like a cell phone battery, like battery is low, and then after meditation,
Excellent, excellent. No, I admire that. I feel like I could use, like, a little break in the day.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's bonus homework. There you go. 1 minute break in the day.
There you go, 1 minute. How can I argue with that, right? How can I argue
Exactly.
with that?
Starting it for our listeners too. Whatever you think can support you to pause. And this has been so enjoyable. Thank you so much for your generosity of heart and sharing. And I wonder how can listeners find you if they want to find out more about your work or your coaching? What's a good website they can visit? And I'll put in the show notes, but I'm wondering.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. I
perfect.
have,
So,
the website that I use the most. I know I've got a old one floating around, but
mhm,
I gotta deal with that. But I have, it's, Shannon Thompson MPC.com, is the address, and,
mhm,
that is where I put at least my newest online offerings. I don't
mhm.
have much on there other than that, but I will be creating some new online offerings for the spring, or offering
Mhm,
some new online offerings for the spring. And
mhm.
there's some older ones on there right now that people can purchase a recorded version of. So right
Great.
now, if people want to access more of my work, that's the place to go.
I'll put that in the show notes. And thank you so much. I actually look forward to having more conversation with you.
You too.
Podcast on or off podcast. This is just so enjoyable. And thank you for your wealth and knowledge and for really elevating your life and
Oh,
supporting so many. So wish you a wonderful rest of the day. And I want to thank all the listeners for listening. And if you're watching on YouTube, for watching. May your moments be filled with ease and may you be present in as many of them. Thank you.
thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation.
Thank you so much. Hello there, and thank you so much for stopping by this channel. I hope you find this content useful, and if you do, feel free to hit that subscribe button. It will really help me to reach to more people and keep this content going. Here we are journeying together, and let's see where this takes us.